So we did our project on starting a business in Australia, and we are going to start with the culture in Australia. Now, it's pretty safe to assume that the culture in Australia compared to the US culture, it is pretty similar, but of course, there's got to be some differences, like including Australians drive on the left side of the road instead of the right, so we think they drive on the wrong side of the road. And Australia is very expensive. Like, for example, a cup of black coffee at your local coffee shop costs $4. A soda costs $2. A peanut bar costs $2.50. This is especially true for makeup products. Like an $8 CoverGirl foundation here in America could cost $20 in Australia. So it's very expensive. But despite everything being so expensive, Australians are very laid back, they're very casual. This will come up again when I talk about business etiquettes. And Australia is kind of constantly in a drought. So Australians are very water conscious. Actually, the Australian government has suggested to shorten your showers down to 3 minutes. So you gotta get everything done in 3 minutes. And Australians are very big sports people, but instead of in America, we like football, basketball, baseball. Australians like soccer, rugby, and cricket. And I would like to note that Australia is in the southern hemisphere, so seasons are switched, which means right now in America, or in the northern hemisphere, it is springtime, almost summer. In Australia, it's fall time, almost winter. But the weather always kind of stays mild during the fall and winter, but it gets very, very hot in the summer, but it doesn't get cold like it does here in the winter. Some Australian social customs. Australians are pretty modest when it comes to their education. The general attitude for Australians is that passing a class is good enough. They're not really overachievers when it comes to school. And Australians prefer to talk to laid-back people. They actually are very not big fans of pretentious people. They like people who are very friendly and just can have a casual conversation with, even in business settings. And Australians tend to downplay their successes, which makes it seem like they're not very proud, but bragging isn't exactly an okay thing in Australia. And Australians are very relationship-based, especially their friendships, so it's very important that they have each other as mates. Business etiquette, when you meet an Australian for the first time in a business setting, you introduce yourself by your first name, you call them by their first name, even if it is your very first meeting, which they're very casual people, so don't get too particular about labels. Even though they are very casual and laid back in their everyday life, when it comes to business, they are all about business. So you dress conservative during your presentations, you give the facts, and if you get very fun with your language, then they'll be like, excuse me, what does this mean? They're not afraid to call your bluff, pretty much. But they do like to incorporate humor into their presentations to make it, of course, a bit more laid back, but be very objective in your presentations. Don't be too whatever with it. Just get the facts, give it to them straight. Just do that. Transportation. If you ever look at a map of Australia, you will notice that all the big cities are on the coast. In the middle, there's kind of nothing there. So Australia is very dependent on roads and air travel. They actually have 300 airports with paved runways. And in the big cities, they do have public transport like trams, subways, trains. But like I said, it's really only the big cities like Brisbane and Melbourne. And right here is a map of all the major roads. And like I said, all the major roads are kind of clustered on the coast, especially on the East Coast, which is where Sydney and Brisbane are. So like the bigger cities. Spending habits for Australians, like I mentioned before, things are very expensive in Australia. Actually, in 2016, Australian households spent $666 billion just on spending costs, like general stuff, including $12.6 billion on meat, 14.9 billion on alcohol, 65.8 billion on cars, but only 2.7 billion on public transport. So if you don't believe me that they spend a lot of time in their cars, this will tell you they spend a lot of time in their cars. And of course, how much money they spend differs from territory to territory. So like for example, in the Northern Territory, per week, the average household spends $1,700 versus in Tasmania, which is the little tiny island underneath, they only spend like $1,100 per week. And as of today, April 24th, $1 Australian dollar is worth 70 cents in American currency. And here is a little chart of their spending habits. So as you can see, Australians spend a lot of money on bakery products. They love their bread. And one thing to note about Australia is that when you are in a store, what you see as the listing price, that's what you pay for it. They don't have like a separate tax like we do in America. We have to do math. It's just all included in the price. And also tipping is very rare in Australia, like don't tip generally. Language, 73% of Australians only speak English at home, and it's important to note that Australia is very close to Asia. So the next popular languages are Mandarin, Arabic, Cantonese, Vietnamese, and Italian. And 12% of Indigenous Australians speak an Indigenous language at home. And about 3.3% of Australians are Aboriginals.
Okay, so Australia's political climate is a liberal democratic tradition, and they have a religious tolerance and freedom of speech association. So they're very much like America, but they combine the British government as well. So they have 3 branches, and it's legislative, executive, and judicial, but they also have the parliament. So their head of state is also Queen Elizabeth. I guess she just has a lot of places that she's the head of. And they have a prime minister, which is Scott Morrison, and he does all the executive decisions and stuff like that. Before you can even go into looking into a business, you need to get a visa. So you have the Business Innovation and Investment Visa, and you have 2 types. So it depends on if you want to operate a new business or existing business, or if you want to invest. So the Business Innovation stream is, of course, for you to operate new and existing businesses, and if you want to invest, it'll be the investor stream. So for the Business and Innovation stream, you need to have a passing test score of 65 on their point test, and you need to have proof of business success anywhere else that you came from. And you have to have a total net of business and personal assets of $800,000 in Australian dollars. So the perks of having this type of visa is you get to, of course, operate a new or existing building, and you get to stay in the country for 4 years and 3 months. I'm not sure why 3 months, but and you can bring an eligible family member. And you may come and go as many times as you want. So, but if you leave, just remember that your visa time is still running. So if you leave for a year or 2, just know that when you come back, you only have 2 years left on your visa. So you have to pay close attention to that. So the cost of that is very, very expensive, as you can see. The cost for the main applicant is almost 5,000 Australian dollars. If you are under the age of 18 and you are an additional applicant, actually if you're over the age of 18, it's $2,500. And if you're under the age, it will be about $1,245. So if you have extra charges, it means that you don't speak functional English. So they charge you on top of this price. So you're going to pay, if you're a main applicant, you're going to pay about $5,000. But if you don't have functional English, you're going to pay an extra about $10,000. So you're going to pay altogether about $15,000 just to get this visa. And if you have additional people, they have to pay an extra $5,000 on top of that additional applicant price. So you better have money because it's really, really expensive. So on the investment stream, they have way less requirements, but you just need way more money. That's the biggest thing. So you still need the same passing score of 65. You have to invest 1.5 million into Australian state or territory, and you have to have a total net of business investment and personal assets of 2.25 million. So, like I said, you better be rich before you just walk in there, because it's crazy. The perks and the costs are the same, and the biggest perk is that you get to carry out business and investment activities. So on your visa, you have obligations. So on the business innovation stream, not the investor one, you have to comply with Australian laws and the workplace laws, and you must have substantial ownership in the Australian business. So you can't just be somewhere else and not running the business. You need to partake in day-to-day management, and you have to do one of the following. So you have to either add to the commercial activity and competitiveness in Australia's territory, or develop business links in the international market. You can employ Australians, or you can export Australian goods. You can introduce a new or improved technology, or you can produce goods that are normally imported into Australia. So in the investment stream, you don't have that many things that you're obligated to, because you already spent so much money investing anyway. So of course you still apply with the Australian laws and workplace laws, and you have to commit to maintaining investment for at least 4 years. Grants can be given only if you live in the state or territory that you invested in for 2 years. So you have to make sure that you're putting in substantial time into the Australian territories. And make sure that you know if your income can be taxed or not, because if you earn income from your investment, it may be taxed, but it may not be taxed. Okay, so in business laws and practices, they are determined by the Australian government and state and territory agencies. They ensure fair competition, protection, and integrity in the market. They split up what they mean by business and company. So you're a business if you're a sole trader, a partnership, or if you're starting a trust. Or if you're a company, you're just a separate legal entity, and you have limited liability and the same rights as a person. So they can incur debt, they can be sued, or they can sue. So once you've gotten all that out the way, you can start to register. You make sure you have your business name, your ABN or ACN, which is an Australian business number or Australian company number, whichever one you decided to do. And you have your GST, which is your goods and services tax, your TFN, your tax file number, and a pay-as-you-go withholding tax. So one of the biggest laws in Australia is the Australian Consumer Law, the ACL. And it's a national law that guarantees consumer rights when they're buying services and goods. So one of the biggest examples I've seen was a customer can come in, and if they are not happy with your service or your good, they can tell you, I want a refund. And even if you have a policy that says no refunds, you still have to grant them that policy, and they can ask for extra compensation because you're supposed to abide by this ACL law. So you can be in some real big trouble. They really do care about their consumers, and they want to make sure that they're holding the service providers accountable for what they're claiming that they can do for a person. The ACL also replaced many other laws that also guarantee the consumer to have rights to receiving what they thought they would receive. So it forces service providers to provide services with care and skill. And workplace health and safety laws, of course, that's just maintaining your workplace and making sure that you have a safe layout and safe labels on everything that you have, making sure that you care about your employees. The Competition and Consumer Act ensures trading is fair. So they really don't want any backstabbing or anything. They want to make sure that everyone gets a fair shot at making money and, servicing their consumers, basically. So money talk. When you're banking, if you're a sole trader, you don't need a business account. You can just use your regular account. But if you're a partnership, a company, or a trust, you need to do a separate business account only for taxation purposes. You must have your registered company name, a TFN, which is your tax file number, ABN or ACN, which is the business number or company number, and your goods and services tax if you fall into the threshold that you need to be in that tax. So their currency, they have bills in 5s, 10s, 20s, 50s, and $100 bills. They have gold coins that are $1 or $2, and their silver coins are 5 cents, 10 cents, 20 cents, and 50 cents. So they don't do 1 cent because everything is rounded to the nearest 5. So you just pay it that way. We already talked about the exchange rate. Yesterday it was 71 cents, and like Rachel said, today it's 70 cents for every Australian dollar compared to America. So how much money you can bring in, they don't have a limit. They don't care. You can bring in as much as you want. You can take out as much as you want. But once you hit 10,000, you have to report it just so they can track where it's going and why you even have that much money or more. So the goods and services tax is a 10% tax on all services and goods that you will charge to your consumer, but not all businesses have to do that. You only have to register for that tax if your tax turnover is 75,000 or more. So if you're below that, then you're good. You don't have to charge your customers that. And the pay-as-you-go withhold is what you charge your employers or your employees. The employers will charge that, and they will also charge it to contractors, some contractors. And if they are making a payment to a business that has not registered and gotten their Australian business number or company number, they can charge them, well, they have to charge them 49% of that payment. So they'll only get 50% of the payment they're supposed to get to, basically, the government is just like, you know, this is your, what's the word? This is how they regulate, basically, for you to make sure that you register your business and you pay your taxes. Because if you don't register your business, you're not paying taxes, and someone will take the taxes from you anyway. So that's not fun. And fringe benefits taxes. So giving perks to your employees will cost. And if you do a company car, if you give discount or free parking, if you have Christmas parties, you'll get taxed for that. So just make sure that you're paying attention to what you're offering your employees. And income tax, of course, is accessible income subtracted from allowable deductions. And you can be tax-free if you meet the threshold of $18,000 as a sole trader. But if you're a regular company, there's no threshold for free tax. You just have to pay tax all the time. So the tax rate for businesses is 27.5%, and the tax rate for companies is 30%. All taxpayers in Australia pay a 2% of their income just to fund the Medicare levy that is universal health care for everyone. And
all right. So, following these taxes, there are a lot of rules that do help prevent evasion and avoidance for people that want to commit tax fraud, which is illegal in any country, pretty much. But resident companies, they are liable for their tax for income tax. Bleh. Can't speak. While non-resident companies generally only pay taxes that affect their Australian businesses. All right, so they do have a full imputation system. This basically prevents the economic double taxation on dividends, but it also splits the company tax between shareholders that have bought shares for this company. They usually do not favor subsidiaries. They usually do branch operations, and I don't know why vice versa is in there because that doesn't make sense. Okay, we're just gonna go to the next slide. Oh, this is probably, I can't read, y'all. I'm so sorry. All right, so Australia's property rules are for foreign investors are, I wouldn't say extremely strict, but they're slightly strict. Because Chinese property owners, they got concerned around 2015. They were concerned that these Chinese property owners were not contributing to the income of housing in Australia, and so they set up new rules and laws. So for non-residents, you can only buy new properties that have just been built. You can buy vacant land, or you can buy off the plan sites. Vacant land, if we were to buy vacant land, you would have to complete the structure and building process within 4 years after getting approved. Off-plan places, they have a plan and set, it's just the place is not constructed yet and the land has not been purchased, but you have purchased the building that will be there. Also, when you do buy land, you do need to get approval from the Foreign Investment Review Board. If you do not get approval from this, and you try to hide it, there is a possibility of up to $135,000 fine or 3 years in prison. For companies, and that's for residential, sorry. For companies, the fine is about $675,000. Next one. All right, I love this one. This one's fun. All right, so employing foreigners. This is a very fun and interesting thing, because why would you just not hire locally? So when hiring locally is a good idea because they're closer, you don't have to worry about them traveling or any of the visas and stuff. There is a downside. You do have to train, you do possibly, if you cannot find them, you do have to train local employees in certain skills if they do not have them. So some companies do not have the time or the money to spend on training local workers, so they hire out-of-country workers that have these skills, which leads to new ideas, less time wasted, and less money wasted. You go to the next one. Here are a list of some of the overseas or foreigners that you can hire. International students, visitors on a work holiday visa, refugees, or skilled migrants. If you employ an international student, though, there is a limit on their visa that they have bought. They can only work 20 hours a week, and they're only there for a limited time, especially if they're studying abroad and they're just here for like 2 to 3 months. Holiday workers, this is a little more detailed. Holiday workers have a visa that lasts for 12 months. 6 of those months must be spent working, 4 of those months must be studying in their skill or career field, and the 2 other months are the holiday portion. You only get 2 months of holiday, which is sad, and the rest of the time you're either studying under someone or with someone, and then the 6 months you're working. Refugees, though, which is probably the best option if you want to hire someone that is technically a foreigner but lives in Australia, because refugees, with their visas that they have, they can permanently work and live in Australia with very little restrictions of how long they can work. And then skilled migrants, this is probably the second best option, sort of. Skilled migrants, they only have a visa, and they have a visa that that pertains to skilled working, and they are only there until their skill is no longer in demand. So in order to get a skilled migrant visa, you have to have a skill that is in demand in Australia. Right, importing. Right, so there's not a real general license for importing goods, but if you do import goods, they have to go through the Australian customs, and they have to meet import and quarantine permits that are set in place. They have to meet special treatments for whatever good or service. There's a lot, and safety requirements. So basically, you probably are not allowed to import chemicals or firearms without the proper checks, the proper permits, and all that. There are some costs to importing that are factors, which are clearance fees, customs duties, which is the people that work at customs. There's a possibility that you have to pay for what they're doing. The goods and services tax, that's just a given for importing and exporting, and any other taxes that could possibly pertain to any equipment that you have on file. Exporting is a little bit more difficult because you have to stay on the exporting, because you have to make sure that it gets through the Department of Home Affairs, and you have to also make sure they have stricter requirements for exports, and the main thing is you just have to stay on top of it because I can't finish that sentence. But there are risks to exporting, which is the foreign exchange. You have to be aware of other countries' policies of what you can send them and what you can't send them. Politics, we're just not going to get into that. There's always shipping costs no matter what you do, unless you go on Amazon Prime. There are quarantine risks, especially for chemicals or things that have chemical substances on them, and there are legal issues that I think were discussed earlier. But there's a cost-effective way that I found, and it's the EFIC Small Business Export Loan. I didn't put export there, I'm so sorry. But it's mainly designed for all small businesses, and their main focus is your ability to service the loan. That's the main thing that they care about. It's easy, it's fast. You can also do special export online processes through websites, emails, and any other electronic means of communication. That's also cost effective. And yeah, I think that's about it.